so much for tuning in. I would like to give over a sikha from the Rebbe, a talk of the Rebbe on a very special night. Tomorrow night is the 15th of Av. 15th of Av is the highest point of the year. It's a very special time. It's the ultimate descent after the descent. So last week we had the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Tisha B'Av, which is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. Now, the descent leads to an ascent, and the purpose of the descent is particularly for the ascent. So the 15th of Av is a very special time. I want to explore what this date is historically, based on the sikha from the Rebbe. And ultimately, the main purpose here, we should state that early, is that the main purpose here is love and unity. That's the ultimate purpose. Ultimate purpose of any pain or destruction of anything ultimately brings us closer to love and unity. Because if you think about it, if you don't care about someone, so there's apathy, not hatred. If you hate someone, it means really deep down you love them. They're just not seeing things or whatever it is from your perspective. And sometimes that causes you to have mixed feelings. But as we mature, we learn to have compassion, meaning if someone says something to us where it contradicts our opinion, contradicts our belief system, instead of getting fired up about it, which we may inside, we don't always have to express it, and on the contrary, we can appreciate a different perspective and learn a different perspective and learn from everyone's perspective. And it says that King Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, had 3,000 perspectives. So he's right, she's right, everyone's right. So the idea of love and unity we're going to learn about in this special sikha from the Rebbe, from the Lubavitch Rebbe, who is the leader of the Jewish people, and who gives us guidance, gives us perspective, and ultimately is the true mentor for everyone in this world. So it says in Tractate Tainus, in the Mishnah, it describes the 15th of Av. It says there were never greater days in Israel than the 15th of Av and the day of Yom Kippur. And on these days, the daughters of Yerushalayim, daughters of Jerusalem, they used to walk out in white garments, which they borrowed in order not to put anyone to shame, and they danced in the vineyards. For the reasons this unique special occasion took place, explains in the Gemara that on this day, on this special day, that permission was granted for the different tribes amongst Israel to intermarry, which was a big deal because land is precious. You don't want to give away land, especially to different families. So it was a big day that allowed for this intermarriage, and it's very rare that such a thing took place. In order for it to take place, it had to be independence and peace in Jerusalem. So such a time existed for a very small period of time, actually, historically and practically. And we learn out a tremendous amount from this short period of time. In addition, it says that the 15th of Av is the time when the moon starts to wane. In other words, it starts to become darker. So in other words, with the 15th of Av, the specialness of the 15th of Av also has to do with the day of the 15th. So the 15th and the idea of the moon waning go together. It's typically what happens on the 15th. So usually you have a full moon at the 15th, and then it starts to become darker and darker. So same thing with the time schedule, that the summer months starts to come to an end, and we start to transition and beginning of transitioning. And so therefore on the 15th of Av, it's always been customary, especially on the 15th, to celebrate. For example, Pesach and Sukkot are celebrated on the 15th. And so it's a time of celebration even though we go down. And that's really a key lesson in all this, that in a time where things are starting to slow down and it's becoming seemingly darker, that's when we increase our joy. And it's really the epitome of joy and tremendous blessings that are available to everybody. So on the 15th of Av, it also discusses in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmi, explains that in Av, the lion rose, referring to Nebuchadnezzar, not a very nice king to the Jewish people, And it says in the constellation of Lion, and destroyed Ariel, referring to the Beis HaMikdash, meaning Nebuchadnezzar came about in the month of Av, and he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash on condition that the Lion, this constellation, will come again the Lion will come in this same month to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, the destruction only happens for the sake of rebuilding. So God does everything for a purpose, and sometimes, externally, we might think that, the situation looks grim. Right? We might have felt that before. However, we should know that the situation is never grim, that no matter what happens in a person's life, no matter what challenges, the reality is that you just got to pick yourself up and try again. And the good news is, when you do that, so Hashem gives us a promise. The promise is that the temple will be rebuilt. And we'll discuss this idea of the three temples, where you have the first temple, the second temple, and ultimately the third temple. So it says about the first temple, that the first temple was characterized by Giluyim. You had the Urim V'Tumim, you had the Keruvim. It was an unbelievable sight to see that it's just like revelations of godliness. It's just like unbelievable. And so therefore there was tremendous fighting amongst different families over who would be able to be the leader of the Jewish people in the Beis HaMikdash and be able to experience these tremendous Giluyim. And a lot of bribery happened and all sorts of corruption happened. And ultimately, because of that competition for those great Giluyim, the temple was unfortunately destroyed. And then came about the second temple, which is essentially the time of Baal Tshuva. So the first temple is kind of like FFBs, where they get to grow up in the king's palace, and they see the beauty of Hashem, and they see miracles left and right, and they hear Rebbe stories left and right. And as it says, there's miracles under the table and no one's picking them up. Because there's just so many miracles, abundance of revelation, abundance of miracles. Because God really loves us and He wants to express that love for us. The second temple is characterized by what's called the Avodah of Baal Tshuva. And that was primarily through Rabbi Akiva, who was the most revolutionary individual of his time. And it says about the second Beis HaMikdash that it was bigger, it actually lasted longer, it lasted more years. However, physically it didn't have these great revelations of the Urim V'Tumim and the Keruvim and all these great sights. On the contrary, it had the revelation of the Baal Tshuva. And what's the revelation of the Baal Tshuva? It says about Rabbi Akiva's students that they were so great that they had unbelievable perspectives and tremendous depth into Torah. And from a Hasidic perspective, it's inappropriate to say that God lacks anything and the second temple lacks anything. And therefore, the second temple was also perfect in the sense that the Giluyim that came from below, the Giluyim that came from the Avodah of the people of Rabbi Akiva's students were so great that if there were the Urim V'Tumim and the Giluyim of the first temple, it would take away from the Giluyim. It wouldn't make sense. It was not necessary. It would contradict the whole purpose of the Giluyim of the from below. And some explained that because the second temple was longer, lasted longer, and the temple itself was bigger, so therefore the Giluyim of Baal Tshuva are greater. But that's a separate perspective. However, even so, the Giluyim of Baal Tshuva, no matter how great they are, because they come from below and they come from man, nevertheless, they still come from below and they come from man. And what that means is explains in the third temple. There's two opinions. One, Rambam says that it's going to come from below. Rambam's an ultra-rationalist. And Rashi explains it's going to come from above. And this is one of the few places actually that the Lubavitch Rebbe and the Rogatchover Goyen, who is the teacher of the Lubavitch Rebbe, who actually gave the Lubavitch Rebbe smicha, his rabbinic ordination, he explains that really that the from below will happen at the gates, that Mashiach will lift the gates, and from above, as Rashi says, the temple will come down from Hashem, and that's how it will be permanent. Because it comes from heaven, there will be certain permanence to it. It will be made of materials that like steel that previously were not appropriate in the Beis HaMikdash, will be allowed in the third Beis HaMikdash, specifically to show the eternity of it. So we learn in the month of Av that is a time of tremendous transformation, and tremendous transformation is love and unity. That's where the distance, the Ratzah V'Shuv. It explains how, it's a famous question is, how is a person to love God? And there's many opinions on this, but the Rambam explains that a person truly loves God from a distance, not close. Because sometimes when you get too close, you get too familiar and you lose respect. But when there's a certain distance, there's a certain respect. And through that respect, at the appropriate times, there's a fire that continues to burn, and there's times where you act on that fire, and there's times where you're not supposed to act that fire, where you allow the fire to build up through tremendous respect. And respect oftentimes is not saying things. Yeah, that's the key to respect. It's not saying things, it's the opposite. It's not saying things. So sometimes we want to say things, we want to, be kind and give great advice, and we have great ideas for people. But sometimes it's best to give people space to be themselves and let them come to you if they need some advice. So it says about the month of Av, this month of Av offers such tremendous opportunities for transformation. Specifically, the opportunity to become closer to Hashem. And it explains how do we do that? We do that ultimately through Torah learning. Rabbi explains that on the 15th of Av, we increase in Torah and we increase in tzedakah. What's the idea of increasing in Torah and increasing in tzedakah? So the idea, it says that Tzion will be redeemed with justice and her returnees with charity. So learning specifically Torah having to do with civil law, specifically giving tzedakah for the sake of Torah learning and in accordance with Torah learning. So then you fulfill the verse in the Yerushalmi where Zion will be redeemed through justice, which is Torah learning, and through charity. Returnees will be with charity. So you have the advantage of both limud Torah and tzedakah. And ultimately, the purpose is action, right? Ma'aseh hu ha'ikar. The idea is that why do we learn Torah? So we know what to do. How else would we know what to do, right? But the purpose is mitzvahs. So if we just learn Torah all day and we don't do mitzvahs, then we're not really actualizing the purpose, because the purpose is mitzvahs. However, we have to know what to do, and we have to make the mitzvahs beautiful, meaning the intention behind the mitzvahs changes every time. So if you're a Jewish man, you put on tefillin. So tefillin is different every morning. Every single morning is different kavanas, because that day you learn more Torah, you've equipped yourself with more oil, more light, and you're coming from a higher place. You're coming from a place of tremendous revelation, because now you have new insights and new godliness and new getlichkeit that you're tapping into. And through tapping into this high level of godliness, through learning more Torah, and through giving tzedakah before learning Torah, and through giving tzedakah even during the times where you're not able to learn Torah, then a person takes this tremendous or in the study, and then you fulfill ultimately the prophecy that you must gather together the people, the men, women, and children, and let them hear it. They will thus learn to be in awe of God your Lord, and carefully keeping all the words of Torah. And what does that mean? So that means when we publicly announce that we are committing to a year of learning, meaning since we're starting a new path with the 15th of Av, we're transitioning into a new cycle. So therefore, it's appropriate before taking something on to make preparations, make achanas. And how do we make those preparations? By making a plan and making certain commitments. For example, I want to learn Torah. I want to increase my Torah. How do I do that? I want to learn for X amount. I want to accomplish this. And then you break it down in 52 weeks, in 20 days, whatever your goals are, whatever is necessary to learn that. So by breaking that up and writing it down, a very detailed, concrete plan on how you choose to accomplish that, as it says in Torah that the beginning is rooted in the end, and the end is rooted in the beginning, meaning that whatever you plan to do, you have to see the end in mind, right? You have to have the vision. If you don't have the vision of the end in mind, then you're going to get chopped up by the water. You're just going to be flowing around. However, if you have a clear vision and you know where you're going, so then you can work backwards. You can reverse engineer things, as they say. And you reverse engineer where you're going, and you work backwards, and then you give it over to a couple of people, get their opinion on it. And then the Rebbe asks that you write down your goals, and you write into the Rebbe, and you say that, the Rebbe, these are my goals for the year. And the Rebbe very much asked that by the previous Rebbe's kaver, by the Ohel, that should be submitted plans for the year on how the Torah learning will go, and have someone's plans for their tzedakah plans, and all things how they should want to be better in Abbas Yisrael in different areas in their life they like to improve. So I want to encourage everyone to consider taking a moment and writing down your plans for the year, or at least for the week, or at least for a day. Think about your ideal day and how a perfect day in your life will look like, and write that down, and then try that out for a day. See how it goes. Thank you.